This, of course, is in session. We're watching the Casey Anthony murder trial. New testimony starts this afternoon. Afterwards, the state, as Ryan was saying, could rest their case today or maybe tomorrow morning. You have watched this defendant throughout this entire trial show a range of emotions here. Here she is laughing. We've seen her sobbing. We've seen everything in between. Psychotherapist Fran Sherman is going to try to explain some of Casey's demeanor based on, everything she knows. She's the expert here, not us. So to talk about how testifying may have affected Casey's parents, George and Cindy, as well as Casey, want to bring her in. Fran, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It's good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Christy. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So obviously it's a very emotional case as it is, because we're talking about the death of a two-year-old little girl. We've seen Casey laughing. We've seen her breaking down in tears, just sobbing with her attorney at her side. We've seen her outright angry at times. What do you make of what you've seen of her during this trial thus far?
Well, early on, I really had thought, and again, I don't know Casey, I have not seen her personally, but I really believe that she has a borderline personality disorder. And to just be in layman's terms, it really causes people to have difficulty forming relationships. Emotions are very bizarre. Sometimes they're very flat, sometimes they're very grandiose, expansive. So she really does present as somebody with that disorder. And I think some of her sadness has been sincere, and I think other of her behavior has been obviously very, very bizarre and insincere.
And almost staged. I mean, some people on my Facebook page and on Twitter, there are so many people that don't believe anything about her is genuine. I tell this story all the time, but I've worked with borderline women before, and I remember saying to one person, well, how do I know about anything that you say is true? And she said, well, I tell the truth 50% of the time. And that's pretty much how Casey is. I mean, you never know what she says or what she does if that's real. And so I think for the jury and for the general public, it's hard to trust anything that she does. I do believe, again, that there were probably moments that she was sad, but I don't necessarily think it was sadness about Caylee. I think it's sadness about herself and about what might be happening to her life and about how she looks to the public. Because again, with personality disorders, you're very narcissistic and you want to look just perfect and all good and be admired. And obviously, she's not being admired now, so this is pretty horrifying for her. You said that they tell you, one person told you, well, you know that I'm lying 50% of the time. Do people with these kinds of disorders, or that are borderline, as you say, you think she might be? And I think that's one of the most bizarre things about this trial, because the defense isn't claiming that she has an actual mental condition, so it's really hard to try to explain away what she's done. But if somebody is lying 50% of the time, do you think if they are borderline, did they know they're lying 50% of the time, or have they convinced themselves of what they've said?
That's a really fabulous question, and twofold. I think that sometimes she does know she's lying, but I think part of the disorder is that you really are lying pathologically. So you sort of don't believe your own stuff, and you keep making up stories, and you believe the stories. And as far as the defense using that, it's not a diagnosis where people, hear voices or psychotic. So they really are. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a psychotherapist, but they're not psychotic, so they're not unable, they know what they did.
They know,
they have that
the
ability
difference
to
between
know.
right and wrong, sure. But
Absolutely,
I think what everybody watching has such a hard time wrapping their head around is the fact that she lies so easily and fluidly, and it makes you wonder, is that indicative of someone who has suffered some sort of trauma, as the defense, claims that she was molested since she was 8 years old? Is somebody that has this condition, is it from trauma most likely?
Another excellent question. Nobody can say for sure whether George Anthony or her brother Lee
assaulted her. But for the most part, the great majority of people with this sort of disorder do have some trauma in early childhood and have and in later on into childhood, and do have difficulty forming relationships, and therefore they do lie. Everybody is either good or bad. For example, when her mother came for Mother's Day and she wouldn't let her in, she was punishing her because she was angry at her mother. Again, all good, all bad. Again, tremendous difficulty forming any kind of relationships. And yes, the vast majority of cases, there is an indication of trauma in early childhood.
Yeah, because you wonder what might have triggered that condition. Let me go to, I want to run some sound of her father, George Anthony, who's on the stand, and the moment that prosecutor Jeff Ashton asked him on direct whether he ever abused Caylee.
Have you ever sexually molested your daughter, Caylee Anthony?
No, sir.
Okay, you're the expert here. I know you're not a body language expert, so to speak, but a lot of people have tried to pick that apart. He looks down. Let's face it, he's in an excruciating position, but what do you read from his reaction to that question?
You know, again, I believe, because of who Caylee is, that something happened. And I believe that many people who are perpetrators deny. Denial is a wonderful defense mechanism. It protects our psyche so that George Anthony, if he did molest his daughter in any way, he's probably filled with lots of shame and lots of denial. And then, again, he's having to admit this to the world and then maybe to his wife, who possibly does not know that any of this went on. So do I believe that something happened? In my heart of hearts, in my gut, and through my professional experience, yes, I do believe that something happened. Do I know exactly what? No.
Right, but speaking in generalities, I know we can't speak specific to this case because really
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, one thing that I've learned is the only people that know what happened are the people behind the closed door.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, but when we talk about Cindy Anthony too, because her emotions have been so raw, I want to show some sound of when she started talking about the moment she learned that Caylee had been missing for 31 days.
One of the times that I walked to the room, Caylee was sitting on the floor crying, and I overheard her tell me that Caylee had been gone for 31 days, and that Sandy had taken her.
How did you respond to that?
I lost it. I just went into the room and started yelling at Caylee and said, what do you mean she's been gone? Why didn't you tell me? I swore at her and hit the bed and ran out and called the police again.
Boy, that is a broken woman. I don't even know how else to say it when you watch it other than to say she's a broken woman. And it seems like she is in such an impossible position because I would think that her feelings are so polarized regarding Jose Baez, the defense attorney in this case. On one hand, he's trying to save her daughter. On the other hand, he's accusing her father, George, of molesting her and of having a hand in the cover-up of this accidental death, as the defense is trying to put it out. How does someone, a parent or somebody that you love, how do they reconcile those feelings?
You know, it is, I think she's in the most difficult position of all. It's absolutely heart-wrenching. And, you know, I'm sure that regardless of what she may believe Caylee did or not, she still loves her. That's her daughter, and she's looking at the possibility of losing her daughter. She's already lost her granddaughter, her beloved granddaughter, and now she's finding out information that her husband might have been involved in what had happened, and in fact that her husband might have molested her daughter. So it's sort of like her entire world has fallen apart, and it's just an incredibly sad situation.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to say it.
Yeah, that's it. It's just horrible.
You know, I think people watching this, though, because we know that there are a lot of people walking around who, you know, everybody says whose family doesn't have some dysfunction in it, certainly, and there are a lot of people walking around who have suffered trauma that may be not to the scale of Caylee Anthony, but maybe dealing with their own issues and they don't know how to reconcile them. But this seemed to me, on some level, to be a wake-up call for parents. And here's what I mean by that. Caylee lied for years, couple of years, about working at Universal, about Zanny the nanny, later about this gentleman that she said lived in Jacksonville. And it seems like George and Cindy started to realize gradually that these were all lies, that it didn't completely unfurl all at once. But for other parents out there, when do you recognize that your child's lies may be dangerous in the sense of mental health?
You know, again, Christy, that's a great question, and it's so hard to answer because people like Caylee are so good at their craft, they're so good at lying that sometimes it's almost impossible to figure it out. They do it for years and years and years, and then also she's an adult, so the parents at that point don't have that much leverage to really find out if what she's doing or what she's saying is the truth. I think one of the things that I say in my practice all the time is that you need to start an open dialogue with your children from the moment they're born. Talk about communication, communication, communication. It's all about the relationship that you build early on. And if I can give any advice to parents out there, start an open dialogue with your children today. If you haven't done it yet, it's today. And make them feel safe and secure and let them know that regardless of what happens, you're going to love them and you're their ally and that you're going to work through it together. It's an awful situation, but parenting is really hard work. And it's communication every day. That's the most important thing.
Fran, it's such great advice. Thank you for sharing it with us, Fran Sherman, a psychotherapist. It's been so good to talk to you and get your perspective. Thanks again.
Well, thank you so much, Christy. Have a good day.
You too. You too.